Welcome back to the CSP Elite Baseball Development Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Cressey, and this is episode 120. This is going to be the last episode of this season. We're going to take just a little break to gather our thoughts and get some content pulled together. But am ending on a really high note. The two guys on this show are going to be representing CSP hitting. CSP hitting is actually 4 coaches, and on this one, we've actually got our hitting coordinator, our associate hitting coordinator, and these guys are absolute stars. They grind really hard and put a lot of effort for our athletes. And the results this offseason from our pro hitting crew have been really, really impressive. So I want to make sure we kind of took a little bit of time to reflect on what worked, what didn't work, what we enjoyed, and some of the lessons that they picked up along the way. So this is a really cool show that I think everyone will really benefit from, whether you're a player, a coach, a parent, or anybody else in the baseball community. So enjoy.
This episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens, the most comprehensive NSF certified for sport daily nutritional supplement I've ever tried. With so many stressors in life, it's difficult to maintain effective nutritional habits and give our bodies the nutrients they need to thrive. As a father of 3 young kids and a co-founder of multiple businesses in multiple states, on top of still being an avid exerciser, I know that busy schedules can really take their toll on us. Whether it's poor sleep, exercise or life stressors, environmental factors, or simply not eating enough of the right foods, we can wind up deficient nutritionally. This is where Athletic Greens can really help. It's a game-changing nutritional insurance policy. They simplify the logistics of getting optimal nutrition on a daily basis by giving you just one thing with all the best things. And that's why I use it daily and recommend it to our athletes. 1 scoop of Athletic Greens contains 75 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced ingredients, including a multivitamin, multimineral, probiotic, green superfood blend, and more. They work together to fill the nutritional gaps in your diet, increase energy and focus, aid in digestion, recovery, and supporting of a healthy immune system. This all can happen without taking multiple products. While most nutritional products come to market and stay stagnant, Athletic Greens continues to obsessively improve this one holistic formula based on the latest research, producing 53 improvements over the last decade. They invest in the most absorbable and natural source of each ingredient and go above and beyond in third-party testing to ensure their customers continue to receive the highest quality and best daily nutritional habit on the planet. It's lifestyle friendly, whether you're keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, and contains less than 1 gram of sugar without compromising on taste. They put 75 ingredients through the NSF for Sport certification to come up with a formula that's trusted by some of the world's best athletes, including our own. Right now, Athletic Greens is giving our listeners 10 free travel packets with their subscription. Simply go to athleticgreens.com/Cressey to receive my offer. These travel packs are perfect for supporting your immune system, energy, and gut health when you're traveling for games, training, or simply when you're on the go. They can be a great counterbalance to less than ideal on-the-road food options. So if you want to bridge the gap between deficient and optimal and give yourself the best chance to get nutrient diversity, then head to athleticgreens.com/Cressey and get your 10 free travel packets today. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Cressey, CRESSEY.
We have 2 guests for tonight's episode. Max Rios serves as CSP Florida hitting coordinator. Originally from New York, Max played 4 years of college baseball at Northwood University's Florida campus and subsequently in the Frontier League and Can-Am leagues. Max has been coaching area high school athletes for over a decade, in addition to his offseason work with college, minor league, and major league hitters. Max is a firm believer in the importance of establishing a routine to train movements that translate to the batter's box, learned through years of working with and learning from top players at all levels. Max is also the president and head trainer of the Rockets baseball organization and has been since 2013. Our second guest, Tyler Wolfe, serves as associate hitting coordinator at Cressey Sports Performance, Florida. Prior to joining the CSP staff, he worked as a minor league hitting coach for the St. Louis Cardinals. Tyler played baseball at Des Moines Area Community College and Kansas State University as an infielder and pitcher before being drafted as an infielder by the Astros in 2016. He went on to play 4 years of professional baseball before starting his coaching career. His first coaching role was as the assistant hitting coordinator for the Minnesota Blizzard, a premier Midwest youth and high school travel organization. Tyler holds a bachelor's in psychology from Kansas State and a master's in sports management from Indiana State University. All right, fellas, this is long overdue. Welcome to the show.
Oh, yeah.
I see you every day, so it's not like we don't interact on a regular basis, but I'm actually really excited about this because I feel like you're like some hidden treasures in the baseball world. You guys are grinders. You're always out in the cage and on field working your butt off. And and really putting in the effort on behalf of our guys. And, admittedly, we haven't done a great enough job of celebrating that in a very public forum. So this is an opportunity for us to showcase our dudes behind the scenes who are really helping our guys mash. So we're excited to have you. But I think the first place to always start is, kind of like what got you into coaching. And there's a saying, those who can do and those who can't coach. Both you guys were players in 4-year college careers. When you look back, and then we'll go Max first and then to Tyler, what kept you from getting to the next level, and how has it shaped the way that you develop, the hitters that you work with today?
I think some of the main things that really helped me understand, how to kind of get over that barrier was just how to take care of my body, understand my body more. And there's times where I jokingly say, hey, mind over matter kind of thing. But sometimes you can't do. And, Wolfe and I always have conversations, and obviously our other boys, Gian and Shane, we just talk nonstop about feels, ideas, and a lot of it can't really be done if your body can't help you get through that position, or just in general. So for me, if I could have done things a little bit better or take it to the next level, definitely the gym. The gym really could have bridged that gap to play, professional or at a higher level. So
what about you, Wolfe?
I've got a couple things. Like, my biggest thing being a coach is just like, I always want to give guys like everything that I learned and more, of like try not to let them make the same mistakes I did. Two things that I kind of was thinking about with this is, the first thing is not to hit off the tee as much. That was one thing that in my career I definitely did way too much of, that there should have been, a little bit more like velo, machine work, stuff like that. And then the second thing is always like ask questions. I think that that's really important. That's something that I definitely didn't do enough. And I always try, and every time I'm working with somebody, is, hey, like, if you have a question, like, ask it. Like, if I give you a drill and you're like, this doesn't make sense, it's always like, hey, ask. If I don't have a reason, then it's probably not a good drill.
Right on. I'm always intrigued when I interview guys who are retired players, just because they're so, willing to spill the beans on like how hard the game was, and you hear guys just even talking to guys in the game right now who will come back from an at bat, like, I had no chance. That guy's nasty. Like you hear guys talk about it with DeGrom all the time. Like they might as well have their eyes closed. But I'm really curious, is like, what's the scouting report on Max Rios? If I go back to your college years, like, what couldn't you do, and how would you approach it now if you could go back on it?
One thing I would have really worked on was learning how to pull the ball. I was I was a 2-hole hitter, 6 hitter, kind of always forced to go that left center gap. We were actually talking about it the other day. Like, some of it was something that I was forced to do because I'm a left-handed hitter, righty thrower. So I never really learned how to like use my lower half to get through, release that barrel, that bat head out. However, I, for some reason, had way more power to the left center gap than pulling a ball. So I would say definitely learning how to pull the ball, and going back to what Wolfe was saying, like the machine, accepting it. And everyone would say, hey, hit off the machine. And I would just honestly not do it. And I hated it. And I just needed to learn how to embrace the failure a little bit more. And I think that would be the best thing to describe my, college career. And I was definitely more of a defensive player.
What's the scouting report on you, Tyler? I know you had 4 years, in pro ball. How did guys always get you out?
It was actually pretty similar. Like, I couldn't pull the ball, couldn't really drive the baseball. So it was basically like challenge him, beat him in, because I'm not the guy that's going to beat you at the home run probably. So that was kind of the approach, was just, you beat me in. Like, there wasn't enough bat speed, not enough juice behind the ball. So
absolutely. All right. So I want to talk about this offseason, because this was, it was a lot of fun for a number of reasons, which we'll kind of touch on a little bit later on with the progressions to work stoppage and all that stuff. But we definitely did things differently, collectively, everything from, getting you guys more involved on like early offseason assessments, so we could kind of see, what guys had done in the past, where they were physically and stuff like that. But the results were awesome, and the feedback was probably without a doubt the best it's been from our pro hitters. So maybe we can walk through, like, what's your, we'll start with Tyler on this one, because we started with Max in the first one. What's your ideal offseason look like for a hitter? Where does it start, How does it progress? And we'll assume like, I know minor league baseball is going a little bit longer, but historically, it's wrapped up that first week in September. So you got a guy who wraps up in say mid-September. What are you looking at going to a, February or March spring training report for them?
I mean, it definitely depends on the guy. Like if it is the minor league guy, if it's the fringe big league guy, like theirs is going to be different than say, like a Paul Goldschmidt or a big league guy who has, 10 years of service time. Because those guys have basically the month of spring training to still get ready, where the other guys have to show up completely ready to go. It depends. I think we do, like you do, Eric, a good job of when guys come in, you do the assessment, you look, you kind of look at how their season went and what they did well, what they struggled with. And that's, you kind of base their training off of that. Like, is it a guy who needs to work on bat speed, who needs to work on impacting the ball better? Does he need to work on just kind of staying healthy? Is it working on, kind of controlling the strike zone, good swing decision stuff? Is it the defensive side? So I think that's kind of where you start. And I think each of those has like a different amount of time. Like if you're trying to work on bat speed, like maybe that's something you start with right away. So then when you do get to live at bats closer to the season, they're kind of ready to go and you can kind of dial that down a little bit. If it's swing decision stuff, like that's probably not something you're going to start with right away because when you first get going, you're probably more flips, TBP. You're not getting into the machine work, mix BP, whatever it is right away. So I think it definitely depends on the guy, depends on the level they're at and what they really need to work on.
Max, what do you think? I mean, are there typical mistakes that you see from some like pro hitters in terms of how they attack? Like, I know it drives me bonkers when I hear about guys that like they don't start swinging until January. There's no time to work on anything. And we're in an era now where pitchers are nastier than they've ever been. Like they've got all the best tools. They're ahead of the game. Like, I mean, do you get frustrated when you see guys that just aren't ready to get in quality work early enough in the offseason to make an impactful change?
I do. Some of the things that I noticed, and it was back actually 2 years ago, when like with Jake Mangum came in and he was really big on like because we have a lot of switch hitters, like choosing the day to really get their craft going. Instead, he said his common mistake was, righty lefty that day. I got to get it done. I got to fix it. So like his growth on that helped me learn a little bit more, with some of the other guys coming in that are switch hitters as well. But yeah, certain guys have like the veterans, they like Wolfe was saying, they do have that leeway, and it is, it's not frustrating obviously because they know what they're really good at. Mm-hmm. But you got the grinders in there that are like trying to reinvent their swing or learn a new swing just to stay relevant, or like, possibly pop the 35 home runs that year just to get another contract. So it's definitely it's mixed, I guess, recipes for different hitters, and it's pretty cool. But it's also like I wish sometimes all of them had some of the same stuff,
Mm-hmm. So my next question, I'm going to give a little context to. So I'll say this. So back in 2020, we ran, kind of the pandemic baseball games, when guys were waiting to go back to summer camp. And it was an article that ran on The Athletic that got tons of press back in the day. And it was, I think we can all look back on some fun stuff. The world was crazy. There was no baseball taking place. And we were in a position to try to help those guys get back. And what was fascinating to me that I maybe didn't realize until afterwards is, talking to Paul Goldschmidt this past offseason, we were kind of reminiscing about it. And Goldie was like, that was some of the most fun I've ever had playing baseball, being able to like bring my kids to the park and stuff like that. And, he's like playing alongside college guys and all that stuff. But one of the things he said was like, from those live ABs, I showed up to summer camp and I felt like I was hitting beach balls. Like I saw everything so much better. It was almost like this accidental discovery where I think a lot of veteran big leaguers who took part in that with us, they realized that, the era of like showing up where everything looks like 110 miles an hour when you show up and you go through that first week where it's like, oh my gosh, can I do this anymore? And eventually obviously you come around and it corrects. Guys are more open to hitting live, and, we're strategically positioned because we do have a lot of elite arms where, guys can stand in, they can track, and, in a normal season, they can probably get, 2 weeks of lives in as guys are throwing an inning or two, before they get to spring training. So, it kind of, underscores this, discussion of, randoms versus block practice. I think historically these guys have, done a lot of work on flips and tees. And, certainly as you start to, face cage BP and stuff like that, like there's a little bit of unpredictability to it, but it's very, very different than what we did this year. So, block practice, I always use the example of, hey, go out and hit 6-foot putts over and over and over again. You'll get really good at 6-foot putts that day, but there's probably not a lot of long-term skill acquisition that makes you a great putter. Whereas you go out and you hit a 12-footer, a 3-footer, a 15-footer up a hill, all these different things, and the long-term skill acquisition is probably going to be a lot better. So I guess what I'm curious is, you guys obviously did more random practice this offseason. When, how, who, all those things, was it implemented? You want to go on this one, Max?
Yep. So actually, Wolfe, you can go on that one. That's more of your style.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's not something you bring in right away. You definitely have to kind of, there's a build up to it where you are just doing T, flips, BP, and then once guys are ready. And usually, like if you're working on the swing, you're not testing it right away too with that stuff until you feel like it's definitely ready for it. But yeah, like we had 3 machines, which was awesome. We would go once we got to it, probably usually about a month or month and a half in, I feel like was kind of when we tested it, or especially once we got to about January, when, there's about a month and a half in a normal year until it's time to go. That was when we kind of brought it in where I would start really kind of hounding guys and try and ask them like, hey, you want me to throw you some breaking balls, or let's go here. I'm going to put 2 machines in here, one in front, one in back, so I can feed either one with a breaking ball, one with fastball, or go lefty and righty fastball, a machine on either side. So we did a lot more of that than we have in the past this year. I think just the way the game's going too, like everybody's a lot more open to it. You still have the guys that kind of fight it here and there, but when you can get, this, I think we got to that this year, which was good, where guys would actually kind of get excited. They get through their BP and they're like, all right, are we doing machine now? Or are we going, you going to throw me some at-bats with a couple pitches? So I think we did a good job this year of really making sure that, guys, it wasn't so much like, they weren't afraid of that. They were ready to go. They were real excited for it, which was good.
How do you carry that over? Maybe it's a good question for Max, just because Max, I know you're in season with so many guys, particularly on the young side of things. Like, how do you carry that over to actually, like, taking a team on the road, stud high school players, whatever it is, just because we both know there's like that like feel good at at 5 o'clock. There's that mentality. Like the last thing guys want to do is fail an hour and a half before the game time, even though it might be the absolute best thing for them. And I know there's some great articles about what like the Giants did last year with, what was it, practice dirty, play clean. It takes a lot of buy-in. Like, have you been able to utilize random practice with a lot of your younger guys with success when you're on the road in the summertime?
Yeah, well, one thing that we would do that like we kind of like implement a little more would be like short over the top. It's a little bit more realistic, because the younger guys really don't understand their body as well as the big leaguers. And so the short over the top would be more of a realistic fastball. And then instead of doing the flips, because that's all they do. Wolfie got into it earlier, like with some of the T work, you kind of dive sometimes. They really don't use the lower half the right way. So short over the top we would do with, some of my summer team guys from FTB, or even with our top high school guys in the area that come, they come in for the hour right before their big games. And it's really translated into just a lot better mechanics and more realistic first moves for in-game.
Yeah. We interrupt this episode with a quick reminder that this podcast is brought to you by Athletic Greens. It's an NSF certified all-in-one superfood supplement with 75 whole food sourced ingredients designed to support your body's nutritional needs. I use this product daily, and a ton of our athletes do as well. Head to athleticgreens.com/Cressey and claim my special offer today for 10 free travel packs with your first purchase. I'd encourage you to give it a shot too, especially because of this great offer and because it gives you peace of mind knowing that you're covering all your nutritional bases. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/Cressey, CRESSEY, to get that special offer.
Yeah, if we obviously have a ton of coaches that listen to this, and even parents that throw BP to their kids and stuff like that, guys who throw to their teammates. Like, where do you start? Like with random practice, obviously we went all in on this. We did some of it, in years past. I think this year was when it, I just distinctly remember coming out and like, in early February and Josh Bell coming up to me and being like, "Hey, Wolfie's got the nastiest cutter at 45 feet in the game." Like the guys were, it was cool. They were kind of celebrating failing. You put them in an environment where it's okay to fail and, there's an outcome, that comes from it. Like, where do you guys introduce that random practice? If you're a high school coach or, you're somebody that's working with some of those younger populations, or even, a guy in your shoes who's just getting some of their first professional players, what's the method as well as the timing of it?
I'll go on this. I think for me, it's starting with I like starting with like either alternated or just like a round of all fastballs, like throwing, and then a round of some type of something different. Whether it's just a slower speed, like slowing your arm down and just giving them something slower, whether it's trying to break off, even if it's the crappiest breaking ball of all time. I always start with that and then generally just go straight to alternated, where I alternate between the two. And if you swing at one, I go to the other pitch. So like I throw a fastball until basically I throw a strike and you hit it. And then I go to a breaking ball. And like, even if you roll over, pop up, like we're still going to the other one. So at least you have to make the adjustment back and forth. And I found that's like, for a lot of guys, they really enjoy that. I know like one of my buddies, high school coach up in Illinois, and I told him about that. He said he used it the next day and he said those guys absolutely loved it. Yeah. And that's kind of the experience that we've had too, is you start there, like start simple, but you're still changing it a little bit from the traditional BP.
Yeah. Gets kind of competitive too. There's a little smack talk and some of that. They're yelling at you guys and all that. I think it just makes for more productive training if you could find a way to create that, novel stimulus, But I guess, maybe a bigger picture question is like, in Max, you've been throwing to big league guys for, we're probably 7-8 years at this point down here. How tough is it culturally to make it okay for some of these guys to fail? Like, do some guys fight it at that elite level?
Some guys kind of do. Some guys, honestly, I feel like, not to name any names, but I feel like they need to feel good. They need to feel comfortable. And then, like, I think the last 2 years, more and more with guys like Lamar and even Logan Morrison coming into it, like the angled BP has been just accepted. The longer bat, the weighted bat. They even brought in, with the machine, the dimpled balls that I believe Marcus Simeon is really big on. And literally with our Rawlings machine, all you do is put a high spin rate, and they fail. They fail. I've witnessed them swing through 30 balls in a row. Like, and it's just makes them compete and makes their first move like have to be more efficient, and the idea that they might have against regular BP changes. Now it's like, I gotta be a bully in the box. I really have to, find it within to get the job done. And I think that's huge. Very huge.
Yeah, and that, it's interesting. I've talked to some of those guys about, just the use of the foam balls and stuff like that. You hinted at just in your response, sometimes you're not changing the person, right? You're changing the situation, right? So that was like, one example of guys, they could, effectively see high velo on the machine and not feel like they were going to get blown up and ruin a thumb and miss a week of hitting. So like, maybe that's a good segue to talk about some of the hitting machine, work you guys have done, Wolfe. Like, where do you guys implement it? I know there's talk about different angles, spins, the type of balls you use. So like, give me like the whole buffet of what the options are and when you might use different things for different people.
To start with, you look at pitch usage in today's game, like a lot of the best arms, the majority of guys outside of like a Lance Lynn are throwing less than 50% heaters these days. Like the fastball usage has definitely gone down. So you see a lot more break and stuff. So my goal a lot of times in the cage is, let's go, if you're going to hit 5 days a week, let's go 3 of fastballs and let's go at least 2 days where you're seeing breaking ball if you're just going to do one machine. Because we have plenty of guys who want to come in and they're like, I want to be challenged with velo. But at the same time, it's like, hey, let me some of these days give you something a little bit nasty, like a nasty slider where I'm adjusting, the height of it, location of it, stuff like that. Like I said, though, before we had 3 machines. So we had a lot of times I would set it up different each day, usually with two pitches that kind of play off each other. If I would set them up side by side or one in front, one in the back, where I would put like a fastball, like a riding fastball, and like a big curveball. Or you do days where you do more of like a sinker slider combo. Um, that way too, like if you do have the guys that don't want to do like the alternator to the random machines, you can at least you have the one machine set up, you just feed that one to them. So that was kind of how we like to set it up. We've been going 2 cages with machines in them. One like with the Rawlings we just talked about, where you can control the spin a little more with those dimple balls. That's in a longer cage, and then we'll go a junior hack attack in a shorter cage. And generally we'll kind of go 2 different pitches in each of those. And then if we want to bring the third machine in, we can add that to whichever one to make it even harder.
I like it. Max, talk to me about like some of the feedback you got as you adjusted from just using like a classic 5-ounce baseball. Like what are the other options, and like where did you get introduced to it, and what have guys said?
So like it was a random day. Actually, Ryan Lamar brought in those dimples, and it was literally like the same day I saw Marcus Semien just hitting off of those like constantly. And it was just the most realistic way to get a good first move off without knowing you might break your bat. And it was almost like to please your psyche, but to make sure you're still efficient to the ball. And you could just hammer it. And it was always we have like a little airway that kind of messes with the ball, so it was always going to be a different style of cutter. Some of them more natural than others. Some of them would even almost hit them, like, and it just made them feel uncomfortable just enough, but to be still realistic with a good first move. And it was really, 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 really beneficial. And then with that too, another thing that Wolfe that we would do, that Wolfe would have us do would be like multiple plates. So you're catching the ball at different depths, for the hitters. And I found that was very important too, seeing it out in front a little bit more, trusting that you obviously won't break the bat. And it was very, very important for them.
I love it. So what I like also, obviously we are working in like adjacent buildings. You guys are kind of outside and we're inside in the gym, but I've always been like an adamant, like, hey, you warm up to throw, you don't throw to warm up. And I go, you guys are sticklers for making sure guys that are, they're warming up to hit and not just hitting to warm up. So a lot of those guys are doing stuff, in the gym before they head out there. But there are times when guys will go directly to the cages when they arrive, and you're still, really adamant that they've got to do some stuff. What are some of the ways that you do this beyond just, maybe more of the conventional warmups we do in the gym, dynamic flexibility, foam rolling, med ball, Proteus, all these different things? Like, what are the things that you guys are implementing in maybe more of a hitting specific warm up that, let's be honest, you got to sell warming up to guys, because there is a very generational way of guys just like hopping in the cage and like doing some easy swings off a tee. Like that's their warm up. What are you guys doing differently?
One thing for me is just, I like to try to give guys something that they know is going to help them. Like in the gym, like they know what kind of things they need to work on. They do an assessment. They've been told this stuff. And so the more that I can look at that and translate it to, hey, this is how it's going to appear in your swing. This is why here's a warm up, because in season, you're not going to lift as much in season. Right? Like in the off season, you can do some type of workout every day. In season, you're probably only going a couple days a week. So you have to find a way, when you do go, if you go straight to the cage for early work, you haven't done anything prior to that. There's probably a foam roller in the cage. All right, what else can we give you to do that? So we started using like the super speed sluggers, which is just a bat speed program. We got a bunch of bands out in the cages. Just whatever we can do, some type of squat for a guy, just something to help them feel whatever they need to feel in the cages. Hitting, it always has been, it always will be kind of a feel thing. There's so many guys in the past that talk about, oh, this is what I felt, even though that might not be what it looked like. Mm-hmm. But what can I give a guy? To me, the best coaching drill I can give a guy is something where he's not actually in the cages hitting a ball. It's something outside of the cages that can get him to move or do whatever it is we're trying to work on, just to feel it. and then see if we can replicate that when we do step in the cage.
Absolutely. So I'm curious, you kind of hinted at some of the info that, like, the guys brought in with them and what you've been exposed to. I mean, let's be real, this off season was effectively like an all-star game at CSP. Particularly once, kind of February rolled around and the lockout was in play. Like, you could walk out to our cages and see Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt, Paul DeYoung, Trey Turner, Josh Bell, like Anthony Rizzo and Trevor Story made cameos. Like, there was dude after dude after dude. It was pretty much 7 of the 9 guys, I think, in the Cardinals, opening day lineup. And I mean, I learned a ton, just from watching, but also from talking to guys. And that was just, more so on the training side of things. I'm curious, like, when you guys look back on this experience, it was obviously a unique, month or so, but who taught you your biggest lesson and what was it? I'll let you go first, Max.
Ooh, that's a good one. Honestly, I would really say, like, just watching how Trey Turner moved around and his mannerisms, just to be so loose but efficient. And he was always like, he never really hit off the tee. It was almost like right into flips. That was another thing, like just the process of the hitting. Many guys are really like surpassing the tee.
Mm-hmm.
But just being really efficient with his moves, very wiry movements. The idea of, staying above the ball a little bit more, low line drives. Between him, another guy, he hit with us a couple of times. Miguel Sano, I learned so much, because like the feel versus real for him was insane. He was, really worried about staying on top of the ball, working above the ball, kind of hitting it like off the lower part of the L screen. Then we put the hack attack on the field, and the guy was turning through the ball and playing pepper with the batter's eye. And I walked up to the field right when that happened, and I just I was in shock. It was amazing. So just the different styles, and like Wolfe was talking about, the different thoughts to get that style done, or the different idea, and there's numerous guys. I really shouldn't have said one guy, but like it was just so fun to be around them, man.
Wow. What do you got, Wolfie?
Yeah, I mean, it was awesome this year because we had so many different guys coming in, with the lockout, and just coming in for the live at bats, coming in because they needed, whether their spring training complex was here and they were here early because they expected it to start on time. We had so many different guys who have come from so many different places and different hitting coaches, and just big learning year of trying to learn from all of them and figure out, hey, like I always like start, like, what are you working on? What are you trying to feel? Where'd your swing start? Where is it now? Like, when you first started pro ball, what was it like? How has it changed to now? Those are a lot of the questions that I'll ask guys when they come. But probably like the big lesson I learned this year, I would say Trey Turner is one that I kind of noticed. I kind of took it away just from watching them and flipping and throwing BP to them. Goldschmidt was kind of the same way, of that feel, or like the path of the swing, and how when you're just flipping a guy, right? Like, everybody does flips. Like, it's pretty normal. It's a very common thing in baseball, or the tee work. But they have such a good understanding of how that path that they take in a game, if they want to square up a flip, like, they generally change that path a little bit. So like, their flips, they're taking flips and sometimes like just staying inside it and just hitting balls in the net on the right as a right-hand hitter, like straight into the first base dugout, or maybe hitting like shallow fly ball, like super, like a ton of backspin into center field. But they know that if they take that path in flips, it's the same path that's going to match up in a game and allow them to be on plane with, a 96 mile an hour fastball consistently. So that was definitely my biggest takeaway.
I'll add my own, just because I appreciate it from afar. This is actually our biggest catching crew that we've ever had. It's kind of the first year where we were like freaked out about whether we had enough catchers to cover all of our bullpens. It was a fun crew, and you had Andrew Kisner, Ben Rortvedt, you had Jose Godoy, you had Trace Barrera. Man, I'm like practically forgetting we had so many catchers, and a good crew, like big league guys that all push each other in different ways. And I think it was the first time I really appreciated like the workload that they go through. Like the time it takes to get there early, warm up, receive, first and foremost. Some of the guys would choose to get there and hit before they received. But then to like do their defensive stuff in the cage, and like just seeing those guys roll in at like, 8:30 to start, and then at 1 o'clock just being, coming back into the gym to get their lifts in. I think it made me just more mindful than ever before of like the nutritional demands, like the recovery demands on our catchers. That is just so much different than what we expect of other guys, just because the amount of receiving that goes into catching 6 or 7 bullpens in a given day. It gave me like actually a lot of perspective on like, why we've historically seen some catchers who had to sacrifice offensively to be as elite defensively, or as game callers and all that. Like that doesn't even speak to like how they manage relationships to pitching staffs and all that. So I actually probably learned more about catchers than I did about, anybody else this offseason. So I think that's something that's going to be, huge and really help us sustain things moving forward. All right. So one of the maybe tag-alongs to this is that a cool thing that we all get to see on a daily basis is the interaction of high school kids with our pro athletes. And in reality, a lot of our pro athletes are guys that were with us, in high school. It's effectively a feeder program, either from high school or college. I'm curious, when you look at the younger guys that are in there that get to rub elbows with these big leaguers and spend time in the cages and these cool moments, like what do you think the most important behaviors high school and even college guys need to pick up on from the elite hitters? Max, you want to go first?
So like throughout the last, especially 2 years, just through COVID and then the lockout, we've been lucky to have, guys like Aiden Miola, Jaden Hilton, Roman Anthony, top guys, Cameron Smith as well. And we have, specifically put them in certain hit groups, for hitting, just to be around almost like their player comp, or someone you should act like, or go over their routine and do it with them, or use that professional, like Trace was very good with the guys, Josh Bell very good with the guys, just have them go through the same progression that same day. And to watch the kids leave, I think it was more of a mental like growth than anything. It was so much better because, like, to be honest, the athlete now out of high school their tools are almost just as good, in my opinion. Like when it comes to how explosive they are, a lot of these kids are throwing a lot harder. The amount of power that they're producing is insane. But how can they be consistent is the biggest deal. So watching guys like Josh Bell work on, just his first move was huge for like Jaden Hilton that day, and I can recap many other guys. Like Cameron Smith came in with Trace Barrera, and Trace Barrera was almost like, wow, this kid's only a senior in high school. So it was so special to see their interactions too. There were times where I would take a step back and just watch them learn and grow. And it was almost from each other too, like, what did you see here? How'd you feel? And that was so special for us, and that goes back into the environment we've had. The environment has been creating a lot of these, awesome moments.
That's the culture piece, right? Like, you don't change people, you change situations, right? And it's one thing to throw constraint-based training or a different drill or a different kind of baseball or a different machine angle or something like that. Sometimes it's just the people you get around where, we all saw like just how much the defensive work is better the second Arenado stepped out on the turf. Like, guys don't want to let him down when they're on the field. You literally see it go up a notch. So pretty cool to see that. What about you, Wolfe? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing is we had a great group of pro guys, especially who were willing, like guys. We had a lot of young guys who are awesome too, and they'll be talking hitting with these guys, and they'll be like, "Hey, like, sorry, I have another question." Like, most of our big league guys are like, "No, I don't mind. Like, I'll talk hitting all day." Like, I don't think we had one guy who wasn't willing to do that, which was awesome. But I think one of the biggest things I've noticed that young guys have learned is that, these guys like Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, Trey Turner, like, they're still working on a lot of the same things they've been working on forever, right? You don't just work on one thing and it automatically fixes itself, right? Like, your body always kind of wants to resort back. And so they're still constantly, it's just that dedication, trying that consistency of, it can be a little boring going in the cage and working on the same thing every single day. But like, that's what's made them so good, is just that consistency. And every day it's like, hey, I got to make sure I don't do this, make sure I'm not stuck on my backside, little things like that, I think, is what I've noticed. A lot of these young guys that we've had around have learned the most, and then I think guys that get an experience like that can really take from.
What do you think, maybe to build on this discussion, we've largely targeted this towards, maybe advanced hitters, things like that. A lot of people listening to this, this podcast, it's like, parents and kids on their way to games, and, coaches maybe on their way to like coaching a practice full of 16-year-olds. Like, as you think about like kind of these conversations with pro guys and high school kids and the benefits there, like what are the key competencies that you try to instill in younger hitters? And people forget, they don't realize, like, we're not just training big leaguers. Like you'll come out and you'll see 9-10-year-olds in our cage. I honestly love it. Max, I know you always been wonderful with the little guys, and young softball players as well too. Like, what are the key competencies maybe across age, groups, so maybe Max, you cover like 9 to 12, and then 13 to 15. And then Wolfe, maybe you can cover like the 16 to 18 group.
I would say the main thing is you notice a common trend of the players that they actually play different sports. Like we would have like the Buchanan family and their relation to John Havlicek. So they would have forced to always play basketball. So they might have been, by February a little bit rusty, but when April came, they, surpassed everyone. So it was like taking the break, working on different movements, mixing some basketball, mixing some football. And I mean, they're all, surpassing all the kids that tend to, stick with baseball only. Not faulting those kids, like some of those kids still become something special. But the common thing is the kids that really apply different sports, they're well off. But when they get to 15, 16, 17, and obviously with the arm care too, it's very important.
Nice. What do you think, Wolfie? What's that next level? Like where when we get to the older age group, what do you expect to see at that time? And if you don't see it, kids might be a little bit behind.
I mean, definitely that like willingness to try new things and not being afraid to fail, right? Like high school, especially nowadays, like you're seeing guys that are throwing mid 90s, upper 90s even. Like that's a new thing at that level that hasn't been there before. Like they're facing some really good arms. And so it's just like a lot of things we work on are lower half stuff. Lower half and pass stuff are kind of our two focuses. Whenever someone comes in, we kind of talk about that stuff. But like my biggest thing for those guys is you come in, like be willing to ask questions, be willing to learn. Like like I said before, if I give you something, ask me why. If you don't understand it and like, how is this going to help me? Ask me why. I think that's kind of the biggest thing for them is just remember, like pitchers are so much better now than they have been, even at that level. So you have to make sure that it's hard to just go out and play. Like you got to make sure that you prepare a little bit more now than you probably had to in the past.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I've hit all my questions, but we always like to do a lightning round in the end. So I drop these guys on you, and you can answer however you want. So first thing that comes to mind when I ask you, what hitters do you like to watch in today's game and why? Max, you're up first.
All right. Oh man, can I be biased on this?
Yeah, for sure. You can do whatever you want. It's a CSP podcast.
All right. I gotta say Ernie Clement, man.
There you go.
Yeah, and it's everyone makes fun of me, but yeah.
He's gonna get a lot of shares on his Instagram.
Yeah, and definitely like obviously the Geloff brothers are just been a pleasure. So like those guys, I try to keep in touch with every day. And
what do you like about watching those swings? Like, what is it that gets you excited about seeing it? Because most people answer this thing and they're like, "Oh, Mike Trout," and you went with Ernie Clement, so you gotta back it up with some intel.
The mannerisms, the adjustability, like how he it's almost like he's a wiffle ball player in the bigs. You tend to see that with guys even like Bo Bichette. Like it's insane, the barrel control, and now he's adding a little bit more pop. On both for all of those guys too. They're adding more pop, but yeah, definitely those guys. They're up there with me.
I like it. What about you, Wolfie? Who do you like to watch? Doesn't have to be a CSP guy either.
My favorite guys to watch are honestly guys that I know have made a big swing change, like the Justin Turner type guys, the guys that went from, or like a Josh Donaldson, or like one of the guys I played with the Astros, Taylor Jones, like guys that made a huge swing change and completely turned their career around. Like I love watching that because those are guys that have just grinded it out. It didn't really come natural. Like it got to that level, but it wasn't as natural as some other guys. So those are honestly my favorite to really dive in and watch.
I like it. All right. So the next question, Wolfe, you go first on this one, is like, what gets you excited right now in the hitting world? Like when you're wide awake, staring off into blackness at 3 a.m., thinking about hitting, what is it that you want to learn? What is it that you want to try? What is it you're trying that you're excited about? Like what's piquing your interest at this point in time the most?
Honestly, like I don't know. I mean, I will say this: my favorite guy to work with is the guy that I can't figure out how to help him. That's my favorite guy to work with. Is a guy that comes in the cage and like, all right, you have an issue. Like I can tell that you're not really low in your lower half. Like there's not really adjustability in your swing, something like that. I give you some drills and can't figure it out. All right, like now that's the thing that's going to keep me awake, and that's the thing that kind of keeps me going. Is hey, some guys are super easy. It's like I give them a drill and all of a sudden, like bang, it just clicks. Other guys, you give them 6 different drills and you still can't figure it out. And to me, that's the thing that kind of keeps me going, that really actually gets me excited because it frustrates me, but also gets me excited. Because when you do kind of figure it out with that guy, it's game changing and it's a lot of fun.
Right on. What about you, Max? What keeps you up at night in an excitedly way?
I mean, it goes with kind of like body movements, but like trying to figure out how or understand like how cool it is to see like a guy like Beltre back knee a ball, a guy like Big Poppy, helicoptering it because of how much torque he created, or seeing Tatis scissor a ball out of the ballpark almost 500 feet, like just how explosive a human body can be, and then like they never go into their swing trying to do that. They go into trying to get their A swing, and just seeing it's definitely awesome.
Nice. All right. And the last question, maybe the most important, like I mentioned, there's parents and kids listen to this. If you could give, and you guys, we're in South Florida, like this is next level crazy parents. Baseball's probably not on the level of tennis. Tennis takes the cake and all this stuff. But, like we know some parents put a lot of pressure on their kids. It's like a year-round competitive environment down here for a lot of kids. Like if you could give one tip to, a parent / kid that are listening to this, in the car on the way to a practice or a game, like what would it be? Max, you go first.
I would say, obviously everyone's going to say have fun, but like be like the best teammate. Only like, even if you're 0 for 3 or 3 for 3, like don't be a convenient leader. Like that's my main little speech with all my young guys. You tend to see a lot of like selfish individualism because of like that element of like, yeah, that's my kid, instead of like, that's my kid that's 0 for 3, but he's picking up his teammate, like that goes a long way. So for sure.
I like that. I've never heard the convenient leader line. I'm going to steal that. I'll give you credit for it. I'm going to steal it. What about you, Wolfie?
Don't be afraid to fail. Like this game is failure, especially on the hitting side. Like you're going to fail. When you practice, like find ways. We talked about it a bunch on this podcast, to find ways to challenge yourself. Mix pitches, like whoever's throwing you BP, have them just change speeds, even if it's the worst changeup of all time, and they're just lobbing it in there. Like do something like that so that you can fail. You can at least like learn to accept that a little bit, but also like that's what's going to kind of kick you in the butt and get you going. It's just constantly challenging yourself and not being afraid to fail.
Yeah. And that's motor learning 101, right? Give people safe opportunities to fail. It's like letting a 1-year-old learn to walk or anything like that. There's nothing wrong with failure. It's a big part of the process, but you just got to be able to fail without consequences, so you can evolve. So that's really good stuff. Anyway, these guys have awesome social media presence, both individually and then under the CSP umbrella. So it's at CSP_hitting, both on Instagram and Twitter. And if you go to that one, it's pretty easy to find both Max and Wolfie on there. Guys, this is awesome. Thanks so much for not only taking the time for all your crazy efforts out in the cages, especially when it's 100-degree weather and you're going through 5 T-shirts a day to get the job done. I know I speak on behalf of all our athletes and our staff that we appreciate you, and we're psyched that you're able to do this tonight.
Shout out to Gian. Can't see it. Shane Olive.
Shane, they need to get their own episode next.
Oh, yeah.
They're CSP 2.0. We're a team of 4, and also the supportive crew in the office with Anna and Gabby and Ashley who keep everything on track. So appreciate you guys doing this and all your hard work, and lots more fun to come in the years ahead.
Yes, sounds good. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
All right.